Hi everybody, this is Tony Alberts, and this is Discussions in Education, episode number 10, I think. I'm trying to do this from my computer, so we'll see how the sound goes. And for those of you who've listened to a couple episodes, and I actually have no idea who who has or has not listened to these. I really should actually look at some of the stats. For those of you who've been listening, I'm really sorry about the sound quality. I'm sure it's frustrating as hell. I'm sure it's made you quit quite a few episodes. I will try to figure out, especially when I have a guest. Obviously, my monologues are good. Obviously, I'm good at projecting. But maybe I need to figure out some sort of fucking mic setup or something. Not quite sure what to do there. That requires a bit of an investment. So I got to figure out what I want to do. But today I'm at home and I'm trying to record this from my laptop in a side room. So we'll see if that's any better. And if laptops are the better choice, then maybe I'll start using those instead during my meeting. Or meetings. Oh, geez, that's the kind of week it's been, sort of. Anyway. So what is the point of this episode? Well, this last Saturday, I went to a professional development. And for people out there who don't know about teachers and how it goes, an expectation for a teacher is that you are not only going through professional development at your job. So, for example, in a school district or in a school, monthly or bi-monthly, whatever they decide to do, schools will often give teachers professional development in areas they think need to be improved. These days in education, the most continuous the most continuous development you can expect is generally either English language learners, like how to teach English language learners and how to modify curriculum for them, how to modify curriculum, or I don't even know if it's how to deal with students with special needs, or they have these things called IEPs, which are individual education plans, which state extended time on test or homework, can turn stuff in late, modifications like that. Or whatever kind of hot topic the district tends to be on. So in a couple episodes prior, we were talking about rigor, but a couple years ago, this thing called the circle of inquiry was a big thing, so a lot of PD was led on that. Right now, I know my current district, they're trying to push professional learning communities. So there's all these phrases that you may or may not be familiar with if you're outside of teaching or inside of teaching or new to teaching or old to teaching, whatever your relationship might be with education. There's a lot of PD. So that's what's offered in district. And there has been actually, just on a positive note, for example, Oak Grove School District recently held a EdTech conference where teachers proposed classes that they would teach on technology, and other teachers got to sign up. And those are actually always fun. They're enjoyable. Teachers get to choose to learn something that they're actually interested in. They get to learn something that their colleagues are doing. It's probably one of the better professional development systems that a school district can set up, just because everything else tends to be fairly weak. Maybe I'll talk about that at some other time. I really would like to talk with my school's coach. I don't want to say her name in case she doesn't want her name stated on this, but my school has a great coach. But I did want to talk with her about how teacher trainings go and what the hell are trainers thinking when they lead them. Just because it would be kind of interesting to get her insights, since she's been doing it for a couple of years. But sorry, I like always getting sidetracked. Another expectation is that teachers actively seek out professional development outside of the school district in areas that they're interested in or in areas that they chose to focus on. So Evergreen School District this last weekend, which today is the 11th? Can't remember what day it is. So I don't know. It was this last Saturday. technically last Friday they had tours that were tied to it, and then last Saturday they had what did they have? They had the actual conference, 4 different sessions that you could go to and get trained on and go see and learn and talk with other educators. And the sessions were great. First, I want to start, before I say anything else, the sessions were good. If you are interested in the style of learning known as project-based learning, man, I am using a lot of educational terminology in this episode. For everyone else out there, project-based learning is pretty much what it sounds like. So you use projects in order to engage students and help them learn. It becomes more of a student-led classroom as opposed to a teacher-led classroom. Teachers, we'll often say that, and people get a very weird idea. Teachers, as much as we would like to disappear from the picture, we have to be honest with the students in that we are always 100% responsible for what goes on in the classroom. So we're always the most accountable ones. It's a way of allowing more discussion and individual searching, and then you can work a lot more one-on-one with individuals who need help. It's just kind of in my opinion, it is a better way to teach. Now, getting students to that point from 10, 14, 2002, 2001, 2001 was in No Child Left Behind, so, and standards were a little bit before that, so getting students to be okay with an environment in which they're unsure of what the right answer is and they have to struggle and figure stuff out. And I've mentioned this before about my honor students. That takes a lot of work. This year I've totally flubbed it. I have done a poor job of it. And that actually brings me back to this Saturday. And even now, I'm fucking exhausted. It's been a long day. It's been a long week. But there were 2 keynote speakers. I unfortunately missed the first one, Sam Seidel, who is an educator out of the East Coast. Damn it, he always tells us where he's from, and I always forget. A big proponent of what's known as hip-hop ed, or using hip-hop and hip-hop culture. He's steeped in it. I grew up with it. A lot of people grew up with it. It's a large part of our individual cultures. But realizing that that's part of our kids' culture too. That's a way for us to connect. That's a way for us to help them express themselves. That's a way for us as teachers to know how to express ourselves. And I'm not, people are like, what about the academic aspect? What about the language? We don't want these, what about appropriate language in school? No, we're not talking about just swearing up a storm, using the N-word a bunch, and that sort of thing, which is the impression some people do have of hip-hop, which is the wrong impression. That is an aspect of the culture. I won't deny that, but it is not the culture itself. That's not what that is about. That's not the end-all and be-all of it. There's so many different parts of it, and so using that as a way for kids to access first the classroom that you set up, and then where you and your community come together and set it up, and then eventually the curriculum, so that the kids can access it and then display their understanding in a way that is valuable and real, and not some shitty test that just checks facts and then tells them they're an idiot if they got a bunch wrong and they don't know anything and they should drop out of school, or tells them that they're a genius if they happen to remember a bunch of facts. As far as I know, that's not really how genius works, but maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, so Sam Seidel, big proponent of that, and the other speaker as well is a big proponent, Chris Emdin, and I was lucky enough to hear him speak on Saturday. He was the initial speaker, and I was talking with some of my coworkers who went as well, and what we said was, it is hard to pass along the message he had with the fervor, the intelligence, the delivery that he had as well. He is a teacher of teachers now, all right? I believe. He's a professor. His focus is science education, but he does work at Columbia University, and he works at the teaching college. So yes, he is a teacher of teachers, and he came and gave this talk. I don't want to do a disservice to what he said, but for those of you who've listened to my other 9 episodes, you'll notice that there's been kind of a little negative a major negative undercurrent in some of the ideas I've expressed. Definitely my concerns, and my concerns still stand. So let me first say that, I definitely feel there are too many standards. I definitely feel that the standards themselves don't lend themselves well to rigor. They don't lend themselves well to being relevant to today. At the same time, I know I've mentioned that, maybe I did, at least with my colleagues, I've mentioned that I've felt very lost this year. And that happens with teaching. I know, I'm sure it happens with other professions too. I don't have enough experience in those ones. The only other one I have is really customer service and sales, and I never experienced it. In customer service and sales, I just realized I didn't give a shit. But as far as education, what tends to happen is you come in, you're idealistic, you've got a drive, you know what you want to do, you know what type of teacher you want to be. And then that's slowly beaten out of you, either by district politics, school politics, nation politics, the day-by-day interactions with students, day-by-day interactions with parents, seeing, not even the interactions with, but seeing the things that happen to our students, the things that happen to our schools, and that feeling of helplessness. It builds. It's hard. You see it, you don't know what to do, Obviously, there's things where all teachers and educators and people who are part of the education system are what we call mandated reporters. That means if we know there's an abuse or something going on, we do have to report that. But the thing is that so many times it's not obvious. It's not clear. Is it abuse? Is it not? Am I not sure? Now, technically, if you're not sure, you're supposed to report it. But there's stuff that you're like, oh, I'm really, I don't think this is abuse, but you don't know. And the thing is it could not, there was plenty of stuff that's okay, this is not abuse. It's just an annoyance, or it's just something that's bothering the student. The thing is if they have 50 of those happening in their life, and kids have tons of stuff happening. If they have a bunch of that stuff happening to them, what do you do? You can't. It's not like you can report it. It's not like you can magically stop it from happening to them, and you don't want to. They need to learn from the suffering, but at the same time, to then be hammered that your job isn't to teach them how to deal with that aspect of their lives. Your job is to teach them the curriculum, get them through it. It wears you down. And so usually there's a drop. There's a drop in energy. There's a loss of focus. And then there's, if you're lucky, a pick-me-up. And that's what Saturday was for me. It was, and this is how I've expressed it this week to my coworkers. There's a bunch of stuff I've done this week. I teach history in 8th grade, and a lot of people are like, oh, actually, one gentleman was like, oh, what do you teach? Oh, history, 8th grade. Wow, you're a strong person. No, I just have a personality that works well for middle school. I also have a personality that works well for high school. I do not have an elementary personality. I can't do it. Those kids, I love them. They're awesome kids. Shit, that age is not for me. I cannot surround myself with those kids. Middle schoolers, I taught 6th and 7th science, 6th grade and 7th grade science. I'm teaching 8th grade history now. These kids are the kids I can deal with. They're about as still clingy as I can stand without going crazy. And then in high school, I consider high school a lot easier. But it's also completely different circumstances. And we can talk about that at some point too. But, no, I don't know what to say. Sorry. So this talk, okay, how am I describing it? What Chris Emdin said this Saturday reminded me of the educator I wanted to be. And showed me the next steps that I could have taken 5 years ago if I had continued on that route. So, it was nice because I realized that I can still get back to there. That's not an aspect of me that's lost. Or else I know I would not have responded to what he was saying in such a strong, visceral, I felt it in my gut, I felt it in my heart that he was right. Or that at least, once again, no one is 100% correct, but he spoke to a truth that I had in me that I knew, once again, what was driving me as an educator. He spoke to that part. He spoke to my drive. He reawakened that. And he reminded me of the importance of community. And he called it cosmopolitanism, this idea of wanting to be together in a group. And yes, there are people who are loners, but if you are alone always, there's been a lot of scientific studies, and I'm sure if you harass me, I can go find them. But isolation drives people insane. It does weird things to your brain. People want to be part of a group. They want to be accepted and acknowledged and appreciated in that group. And if they can't do that, then they at least want to be acknowledged. And that's definitely something that I lost after my first 2 years of teaching. My first 2 years of teaching, I built incredibly strong relationships with my students. I still keep in contact with a lot of them. I love them. My very first 8th grade class has graduated. A lot of them are going to college. My second 8th grade class graduated. A lot of them are going to college. I'm super proud of all those kids. But the situation in which I left, just ripped my heart open. If you ever played old video games, there's a Duke Nukem game. And at one point, he's fighting a boss, Duke Nukem 3D, and he tells the guy, I'm going to rip off your head and shit down your throat. And that's kind of what happened to me. That's what I felt emotionally, and I was burnt out. And I ended up in Mountain View Wistman School District, and it's a good district. All right, the parents, the students are fucking awesome. The colleagues I had, I loved working with them. I grew a lot of strong bonds. Honestly, if my commute wasn't such shit, I was in traffic for 2 hours every day with my wife, and then after my 4th year there, we had my son, and he hates being in the car, so driving for an hour and a half with a sobbing infant who sobs so hard and cries so hard he vomits all over himself, where you got to pull over and deal with that. Not my idea of how I'd like to spend the rest of my life. If the commute was much shorter, or we happened to buy a house over there, if my wife and I just happen to have $1.5 to $10 million lying around so we could buy a house in Mountain View area, we probably would have. But long commute aside, I came into that school, Graham Middle School, and I built community with my colleagues. I can't say that I built that community with the students. Like I went from my first class. I had, my little Yoho, good kid, Jorge. He's graduated now, and he's fucking an impressive young man. But I had my names for my kids. Well, we would hang out for like hours after school. They didn't have band at my first school, and I don't know how to fucking play an instrument, but I had a guitar, and I had tried to learn classical guitar. I brought my guitar. They brought their guitars, unofficial, after class, and I tried to teach them, and we tried to practice that. They wanted... Glee was coming out, and they wanted a Glee club, and so we got together, and I'm not a fucking music teacher at all, so we just did what I know a bunch of other people do. We played music, and we sang along to it, and we sang along to it really loud, and we had a good time with it. At Graham, the kids didn't get that. The kids didn't. I mean, I did track and field, yes. I did cross country, yes. But you're a coach there. Like, it's not that relaxed, low stress, not bonding. And there were kids that I did get close to. Like, let me make that clear. There were definitely students that I built a strong connection with. Some who felt like they could come to me and ask me for help. Some moved away and still ask me for help. Those kids exist. All right, I'm not saying that I totally shut down, but what I will say is that building a community of that. I mean, I went from having a room of 10, 15 kids staying after school and hanging out and talking, and running a boys to men club, trying to teach young boys like how to dress properly, how to tie a tie, how to act, interesting stuff like that, to occasionally having like a student or to stay after school. Having like 5 students ask if they could start a gaming club and them coming into my room and playing games. Like, that's where I was at. And part of it was kind of difficulty relating. Like, for my own upbringing, we went from like a low-income neighborhood to a mid-income neighborhood to another mid-income neighborhood, but owning in that neighborhood. And so, I mean, what always struck me, and I would tell kids all the time, was like, I went through all of the phases. Like, I remember each aspect of my childhood and my schooling. I remember being at the school in which, homeless people would be drunk on the street chucking bottles at us as we were on the playground, and we were running around making fun of them. I remember my backyard duty, singing the old Tony, phony, baloney, me, my, mamoni, Tony. And, and every time she saw me, she used to sing that shit, and I remember that sticks in my head. It was a good group, but it was fucking poor. I remember being in my neighborhood and seeing cars on blocks and shit. This is downtown Sacramento. Going to the laundromat every week so we could do laundry with the little shitty Pac-Man game in the middle that we would try to beg my mom for quarters for, and she's like, fuck, I'm just trying to do some laundry, kids, get the fuck out. I remember hiding from the landlord in my apartment, in our apartment, because my mom and dad said that, oh no, landlord said we can't have kids here, so when he comes by, you're gonna need to hide. And I still stand by the fact, it was a revelation. I mean, I'm 32 now. I just thought of this like 2 years ago, and I think it's because I'm a parent now. I still don't know 100% if there actually was a landlord who didn't want kids, or if that was just their excuse to have some fucking quiet time with some friends who came over. And because, I mean, seriously, it was like, okay, the landlord's going to be here. We don't know for how long. You guys stay in the room and be quiet. My brother and I would just huddle in the bedroom. We'd have like books. We'd play with our toys very quietly, not banging stuff around because we didn't want to get kicked out of our house. I mean, we were terrified of that. Let me be clear. Like, looking back, I can laugh, but my brother and I were scared as shit that our mom and dad would be found out that they had kids in the apartment, and then that, we needed to go. Like, the landlord would kick us out. And then we moved to another property. It was another rental, but now it was like a rental house out in the suburbs. My dad had gotten a better job and was able to bike to school there without, my mom coming along. My brother, they would drop my brother off in the morning at school, and then after school I would bike over to my brother's school because he went to a different elementary school. That's a whole nother thing. That's my problem with fucking honors programs. Anyway, I got into an honors program, my brother didn't, and we got two significantly different educations. That's neither here nor there. But anyway, all of this is I told you guys I would get off topic. I'm kind of fucking brain dead. But let's just say Chris Emdin's talk on Saturday, and Dr. Emdin, it would probably be the more appropriate way to go with it. He seems like a cool guy. I'm sure I could call him Chris, but that fool has done a shit ton of work to get where he is, and I gotta give respect where respect's due. He's a doctor. Dr. Emdin, he reawakened. He reminded me of what a teacher's supposed to do, and luckily, and this is where kind of the week gets crazy, I teach history, and in California right now, there's not currently any history testing going on. They're in the process of developing a framework for the history standards to rework those, and they're going to start coming out with a new test. Now, let me tell you this. The old history test was bullshit, and anybody who tells you differently is full of shit. Currently, they're still giving out the science test. There's a science test in 5th grade and the science test in 8th grade. And the 5th grade science test is also bullshit. And the reason is because the 8th grade history test and the 5th grade science test students on 2 or 3 different grade levels. Which, you are up shit's creek. First off, as someone who has taught history in middle school and science in middle school, let me tell you, universally, in the districts I've participated in, students having history and science in elementary is a long damn shot. It's a long shot. Because there's so much emphasis on English and math that most of the time, and then ELD, most of the time they cut those programs. They cut history down. They cut science down to once a week. And then they do a FOSS kit. And they're not doing real science. They're just doing some random stuff. They're growing plants. Now, I'm not saying that there does not exist school districts or schools or teachers in which science and history are an integral part of the elementary education. I'm just saying, not in poor ones. If you teach in a poor district, that's not happening. Right? I taught in Mountain View, and even there, where it's not that poor, kids having consistent science education was questionable in elementary, right? 5th grade science tests you 60% on 4th grade science and 40% on 5th grade science. They don't remember it. They don't know what's going on. So now these 5th grade teachers are being told they're doing poorly because they're not teaching well, but if a majority of the test is 4th grade, what do? If that teacher in 4th grade couldn't get to history, hell, if that 5th grade teacher, because of the district mandates, couldn't get to, science, then what are you going to do? Now, in my opinion, 8th grade, the 8th grade history test, way more bullshit. 8th grade history test tested kids on 6th, 7th, and 8th grade history. Now, in California, most middle schools are only 7/8. So first off, there's no guarantee that 6th grade class, if it's an elementary, had history at all. Again, that is a subject that is cut down if they need more time for math, English, or English language development. Right? So that's That's already gone, right? 7th grade is world history. 6th grade is ancient world history. 8th grade is U.S. history. So kids are tested on their understanding and knowledge of, and it's not it's not like, oh, what themes did you see? It's this Chinese emperor in 300 BC passed these statutes. Who was that emperor? And you were like, what the fuck are you talking about? Right? Kids barely remember U.S. history that year. Now you're asking them to recall ancient Chinese history, ancient Middle Eastern history, ancient African history, medieval African history, medieval European history, medieval Mesoamerican history. Right? A lot of this stuff is hard for kids to remember. It's hard for me as an adult to remember, and I'm a goddamn history teacher. Alright? I know it exists. I know the basic ideas of each of those civilizations. If you ask me to outline how it went, I could probably give you a decent idea. But when you start asking me for dates and emperors and statutes passed and big ideas and all the big ideas, that's not going to happen. And that's what we've been testing kids on for the past 14 fucking years. At least in California. I don't know about the other states. I'm just saying this is what California's standards do. And it never made any sense. Not once. Not one iota. So they're reworking the history test. They're also reworking the science test. I don't know what they're going to end up actually testing kids on. It's going to be interesting. But, again, I gotten massively off tangent. I apologize. I'm just trying to explain each part as I go along. So I don't have a test this year. I am still expected to teach the history standards. However, at my pace. Right? Currently, we're on U.S. government. All right? Constitution, construction of the government, set up the government, arguments that were going into the government as it was being made, etc., etc., etc. And we will get back to that. But on Saturday, after everything, I decided that Monday I was stopping what I was doing and we were going to do some community building for this week. So this week has been community building. And I'm doing my damn best. And I'm trying to figure out how to do it as I go along. And I know, I'm sure Emdin would hold me accountable for that. Dr. Emdin, Cornel West is another hero. I'm sure he would appreciate the love, but also question the tactics. But I'm always clear with the kids that I learn by doing, I learn by struggling, and I ask them to struggle with me. And so this week, that's what we've been working on. We've been working on trying to build community, trying to create a community. And one of the first things that we talked about on the first day, I just talked about the conference and what I wanted to do and all the job. So in my teaching induction program, that means the program that in which I became a pre-certified teacher. So I got a certificate, but it had to be cleared. They mentioned the role of jobs. And they did not explain it in a way that I understood as useful. Right? How jobs were explained to me is give students some jobs in your class. So not all students, but give students some jobs. You create some jobs, like you're the paper monitor, blah, 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 blah. It's to help transition. Yeah, have a sub if they're not there. Blah, 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 blah. You need to... essentially, they explained student jobs in the classroom. Person who passes out paper, person who organizes computers, stuff like that, as something for the students to do to get engaged in class, something to help with transition so they go smoother and faster, and something that releases me from having to do as much work around the classroom. But here's the thing. I don't give a shit about any of those things. I'm serious. It's going to bring engagement for a couple of students. As far as transition times, I kind of like a slightly longer transition time anyway, because it gives me a bit of a break too. I move very quickly. I talk very quickly in class if I'm talking. I kind of don't mind a minute or two for transition, and I know, principals and that adds up to like 50 minutes of wasted time. I'm like, so I've decided it. But anyway, that's not here or there. And then the last one of lessening work on me, whatever. I'm a teacher. I got into it for teaching. Dr. Emdin explained it finely in a way that made sense. And what he did is he tied it to pre-desegregation schools, so segregated schools in the South. So he pointed out the statistics, and they're fairly well known in education, but maybe not out in the rest of the world. But prior to desegregation around the nation, students with African American students, black students, or black only schools, African American only schools, however you'd like to refer to them, or however they prefer to be referred to. I mean, no disrespect either way. Same with Mexican schools, Latino American schools, where they had these community schools. Those students consistently performed on par with their white counterpart schools, right? The school up on the hill, the school in the nicer area. And let's be clear, they were schools in nicer areas. They were schools that were well funded, the white schools at this time period. And currently too, but let's not get into that shit yet. Anyway, those poor community schools, and we're not talking about segregation or anything like that, but what Dr. Emdin pointed out is in those poor schools, the reason those students did well is because they viewed it as their school. The teachers viewed it as their school, but not only their school, their community, their family, their village, right? And I'm not trying to say like tribal shit. I'm saying like that old saying where it says it takes a village to raise a child was very much embedded in the idea there. And so kids all had a damn job, right? They had to clean the floor. They cleaned the blackboard. And they didn't clean, and they didn't pick up, and they didn't organize, and they didn't repair stuff because they were forced to or they're asked to. They did that because they took pride in their surroundings, because this was their family surroundings. The other fellow people in their village were all contributing, and they wanted to contribute. And that was the first part of it. So that's the first time that I saw jobs in the classroom as not just a fucking job in the classroom. It is identifying your role in the family in this classroom. Because everybody's got a family, and as you know, everybody's got a role in their family, whether it's defined or not. And that role, to some extent, is irreplaceable. So, how do you use jobs for that? Well, that's what you do first, is you give them a job that, one, speaks to kind of a strength that they have, or something that they feel confident about. Now, he didn't make this clear. This is an assumption I jumped to, which is that means in order for me to build a community in which everyone is contributing, everyone needs a job. So there need to be enough jobs for everyone to have. So the first thing I did on Monday, or actually this weekend, or last weekend, not this coming up weekend, last weekend, was come up with a list of jobs that would exist in my classroom. Monday I presented those to the students, and then I got feedback. I said, okay, well, like, what jobs do you think I'm missing? Which jobs do you think can be combined? They gave me feedback in today on Monday. Came up with finalized job lists, right? Now, something else Dr. Emdin pointed out was that if we want to convince kids that they are necessary to this community, that they need to be here, they need to be at school, then you shouldn't have a sub, or like a substitute person for the jobs. There should not be a backup person. What it should be is if that person is not there, then that job doesn't get done. And he happened to use an example of he had someone in charge of erasing the whiteboards in his room. And if that person wasn't there, the whiteboards didn't get erased. And he would do notes if he had to do notes, and that was part of the plan. Then maybe he didn't do notes, or maybe he wrote notes around those other notes. Just so that when that person came back, they realized how important it was for them to be at school. Right? People are like, oh, well, kids get sick. That's true, but also kids... I mean, like, I remember I was sick, and I'm using my little air quotation fingers. I was sick a lot in elementary school and middle school and high school, but I wasn't really sick. But I knew that it didn't fucking matter whether I was at school or not, because I could always catch up on the work or do it later. But no one really depended on me being at school. That was not a necessary thing, other than I needed to make sure I was there so my parents didn't get in trouble, that I didn't get in trouble, and that I didn't fall behind. So it was all very personal to me, affecting only really me and my family, not affecting the wider community. Anyway, yeah, maybe there was a group project, but even then, those were rare and far between. So, I mean, okay, I don't know if he's going to be okay with me sharing this, but he shared it with everybody, and he didn't put a little TM on it, so maybe not. But the example that got me was, there was a girl in one of his classes, and she was essentially growing up in a single-parent home. She was growing up in a home with her mom, and her dad she knew where he was. Had been contacted. He had recently kind of come back into her life in a major way. And then one day, they were talking. This was a Monday, and she comes up and she starts telling him about her dad and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, oh, okay, that's great. I'm glad everything's going well. That's cool. And then she's like, oh, and Friday, my dad is taking, me and my siblings to Disney World. And so she's very excited about this. She's talking about what they're going to do. And he's like, oh, that's awesome. And so she's like, oh, so I'm going to be out on Friday. And he's like, okay, cool. Thanks for you telling me 5 days in advance. That's awesome. And then Tuesday comes, and same conversation. The same conversation, okay. And he's like, okay, cool, like, he's still open, receptive. Yeah, you just told me yesterday, but yeah, no, that's awesome for him. I'm glad you're looking forward to it. Wednesday comes, same thing. And he's kind of getting a little tired. He's like, well, okay, yeah, I get it. You're excited. That's cool. Good for you. Your dad who hasn't been around for the past 10 years, he's back. He wants to be part of your life. He's trying to take you places, etc. Thursday, same thing. So he's like, all right, I get it. Cool. Friday rolls around. He's like, all right, cool. And then the bell rings, and she walks in. And he said, like, he's trying to look at her like, oh, wait, like, I'm sad. Like, he's trying to see if but she's happy. She's peppy. She's talking to all her friends. She's not talking to him about, dad or anything like that. Goes through the day fine. And he's like, as he's seeing this, he says he keeps getting more and more torn up. I'm fucking sitting in my seat laughing, hearing the story. I'm like, I can just imagine this shit. You're watching this kid, and you're like, oh, God, like, is she gonna break down? Like, what's it gonna happen? Is it gonna happen at lunch? Is she gonna start sobbing? Is she gonna start talking? Is some friend gonna ask about it, and then that's when she's gonna go off? Oh my God, how's she doing? She's covering so well. She's being so strong. I'm so impressed. I gotta talk with her. I gotta be there for her. And I guess that's what was going through his head as well. So, at the end of the day, he's like, oh yeah, is there anything you want to talk about? Is there anything you're concerned? If there's anything happening in your life, I don't know. And he's not trying not to bring up the dad stuff, but he's trying to bring up the dad stuff, like, on the DL. And, she's just like, oh, no, everything's fine, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, oh, so, like, I don't mean to pry, but, I mean, like, if you want to talk about, like, what happened with your dad's, today and everything like that. And she's like, oh, no, no, I just realized that if I wasn't here, what needed to get done in the classroom wouldn't get done, the job wouldn't get done. So I just, I called him and, I told him, can we reschedule for another time? Dr. Emdin's like, oh, okay. You know, and in his head, he's thinking, you know, what all of us are thinking, which is like, okay, you know, if that's your excuse, whatever. You know, you could just be honest. You could be straight up. Like, if he just flaked out on you, you know, you could just be, you know, you don't have to use this as an excuse. You can be honest. I thought we had that relationship. But I guess he calls her parent later, and she's like, yeah, she rescheduled. And he's like, turning this, so he calls the mom just to make sure, like, yo, she said this. Is that true? And the mom's like, yeah, she called him, you know, Thursday night and said, you know what, oh, I really need to be at school on Friday, you know, blah, blah. And so he's sitting, you know, Dr. Emdin's sitting there thinking, but like, what? Like, why? And, like, he realized then what it was, which is that he had done a successful thing, I guess, but the students had too. I mean, that's the thing, is like, when this is done successfully, it's not the teacher doing it. This is the students helping to build a community and allowing you to be a part of their community and allowing you to create a community in which they're a part of. It's a very, very together thing, but what he realized is that for her classroom, her community at school was more of a family than her father, who was gone for 10 years. And that he could wait. He spent 10 years waiting. He could wait longer, because what the people who relied on her were her classmates. And she saw them every day. And they were a part of her everyday life. And that right there, that's what got me. That bit was like, okay, classroom jobs can be so much more than I've imagined, and they can be the stepping stone to something greater. All right, let me make it clear. Classroom jobs are not the end-all be-all. They are the first step on a journey towards a community. By giving everyone a role and a position of importance in class and letting them know if they're not there, it's not getting done, is hugely important. It's so important, because it tells them they're valued in that classroom. So on Tuesday, I held out. I sat there with my list up in front of the classroom, had my laptop open, had the list of jobs being projected, and I started putting in names for jobs. All right. So I had all these kids getting these jobs, and they got these jobs, and I said, okay, make a list of supplies that you guys need or things that you want to make this classroom better. What do you need? How can you do it? I've got artists. Like, I'm like, okay, design cool stuff for our walls. I want you to think about, like, how can we make our walls prettier or, like, you know, more engaging? How can we draw in, like, what we like, what we want to see? And they gave that list to me. And then Tuesday after school, I went and bought all that shit. I tell the kids all the time, I'm fucking broke. I don't have much money to spend. Like, it's hard. And I definitely splurge every once in a while, but like that can't be a consistent thing. But this I felt was important, so I got it. I got everything they asked for. I actually picked up a little bit more today too. I'm gonna kind of have to stop spending some fucking money. I gotta figure that out. But no, they got into it. And we worked on those jobs, you know, defined them a little bit more on Wednesday, defined them a little bit more today. The kids worked on those jobs. Classroom is looking clean for the first time all year. Like, it doesn't look dingy. It's still a fucking mess because, you know, the kids are trying to reorganize. They're trying to make it their room. I mean, that was the other thing on Monday that we pointed out. Like, when I was talking to the kids, I was like, look at this room. I was like, how would you describe it? They're like, oh, plain boring. There's some interesting stuff. Oh, that's like randomly cool over there. You know, it's like weird. It's like kind of confusing. It's a little messy. And I was like, yeah. I was like, this is actually how my brain works. Like, this room is a lot like my brain. Like, and like I was telling them, I was like if you follow my lectures in class, they kind of go that route. If I'm writing lecture notes on the board, they're a little messy, kind of plain, kind of random. Interesting stuff in there. Like, you know, you're going to take notes on some interesting stuff. I'm going to talk about some interesting stuff. Sometimes it can get confusing, though. Yeah, and the kids were like, one of my kids was like, oh, yeah. Wait, so Mr. Alberts, you're saying, like, this Like, we're walking into your brain every day. And I was like, shit, that isn't... Yeah, I mean, I didn't say shit because I try not to swear in front of the kids. But, I mean, I was like, yes, that's the problem. I was like, all year, I've been kind of a poser where I've said, this is our community, we're trying to build it. I was like, but every day you guys walk into my brain. I was like, that's got to be uncomfortable. I was like, because my brain's a little crazy, even for me. Like, I love my brain, but it's my brain. I'm used to it by now. You guys aren't used to my brain. You're not in you shouldn't be in my brain. We should have a collective brain. We should have a collective community. And so the kids are really working on it. I mean, honestly, it's crazy. They're doing good. I'm getting the last of supplies tomorrow, and then Friday we're gonna kind of do a bit of reflecting. The next step is I need to set up my students who are going to help me reflect better. I got people who are going to be my documentarians. They're going to be people who students who film me while I'm teaching, so I can try to get better. But I'm gonna have 4 kids from each class come. I'm gonna try to do it as a larger group meeting, so it's not as uncomfortable with just like a small group. But I don't know how the larger group will go. But they're gonna meet with me on Fridays at lunch. We're just going to talk about how the class went, what could go better, what didn't go so well, what things could we do. And I have to admit, that's the one thing I've kind of done all year. I've had like a monthly feedback session where kids give me tips, and then we talked about like, okay, what does this mean? How does it affect it? These are the options that I kind of have because of it. So what do you want? I mean, they've been pretty good at those all year long, so I'm just hoping it's a natural extension, but that it becomes more personal and more specific and pointed. But I don't know. I mean, we'll see where it goes. This week is kind of what I'm willing to sacrifice so much more, but this week is the week I'm sacrificing definitely. Up to a higher God or a higher good. I'm an atheist, so not so much with the God, but I'm kind of like throwing this week on the grenade in the hopes of kind of saving myself as an educator, but also saving the classrooms. Just because, it's just some of them have gotten very negative. So, I don't know where it's going to take me. That's the interesting thing. And like I said, I can't emphasize how I'm not even getting close to the passion, the love, the intelligence that was expressed by Dr. Emdin and Sam Seidel as well. He did lead a session, and it was also, it was strong. They're both incredible educators. They've been working on it. But I try a little bit, right? I try to share a little bit of that with you guys. I wanted to get this out because I thought it was important to get out, but I don't know where to go from here. So I guess all you need to know right now is I will try to be doing another podcast maybe sometime next week. See who I can talk with. Maybe some other people. Don't know what topics yet. As for where I'm at, I'm struggling. But I also feel better about where I'm at as an educator than I have in a long time. I'll say in about fucking 5 years, honestly. And I'm swearing a lot because I'm really exhausted right now. But I really wanted to share my experience with you guys. I hope you're listening. If not, like I said, you're not listening, so who the hell cares? But if you are listening, mad respect, much love. Thank you so much for listening. This is going to be Discussions in Education number 10. I'm Tony Alberts, signing out. And I will work on my sound problems. I know that's an issue. Alright. Take it easy, everybody.